Okay, this is Orlando Wilson, and what I want to talk about in this video is something which affects a lot of people. And from the private investigations perspective, it's something which is, to me, has been glamorized by Hollywood, the movies and TV, etc. And that's missing persons investigations. Missing persons investigations is not what I would say is my main focus of business. We focus more on corporate investigations, etc. We don't usually focus on domestic investigations, be it matrimonial or missing persons. The reason I'm doing this video is because of a conversation I had with somebody recently. The issues we've had with missing person investigations in the past is they are time consuming. They can be very time consuming. And again, the other thing is, if it's an ordinary person, I'm talking a middle class person whose child, friend, who etc. has gone missing, then it can be very expensive for them. And if we're running up the bills because we need to get paid, a lot of people don't have the money to pay the bills. I know it's a very mercenary outlook on things, but we're business. There are NGOs that claim to be able to look for missing people, but again, it's very time consuming and it costs money. Another issue we've bumped into in the past is one person on the few of these investigations we've done didn't want to be found. And when they were located, they weren't that hard to locate. They were like, we're not interested. We don't want to go back to where we come from. We're happy here. We don't want to talk to the family, etc., etc., etc. The family was looking to them as more to do with a will, etc., etc., etc. So it was a messy situation they didn't want anything to do with, but the family needed them to sign bits of paper they weren't interested in signing. So this is where, before we look into if somebody approaches us for that type of investigation, or this type of investigation is a part of another investigation or a sideline from another investigation we're doing, it's something we look into. We look at all angles before we say, yes, we can do something. Because again, there's a lot of different angles to somebody just apparently being missing. Now, advice, the reason for this video, somebody asked me, again, I used to get it a lot in the US, Americans saying their sons and daughters are going to Europe, etc., etc. They've watched too many movies. Will they be kidnapped? What if they go missing, etc.? Well, this is where you have to be. If somebody goes missing, even in the US, if a teenager goes missing, unless there's suspicious circumstances, there's generally not a lot that people will do. They can be reported missing to law enforcement, etc. The police, most police departments are very, very busy these days, so they might look into it a little bit, but if there's no suspicious circumstances, they'll just class the person, the kid, as a runaway, and that's it. So this is where it's like domestic runaways in the US are common. And the trouble is with kids, teenagers, young teenagers, if they get involved in drugs, if they get involved in prostitution, they can end up being trafficked, etc., etc., etc. It's a messy situation. So what to do if somebody goes missing? If they're missing domestically in their own country, then they can be reported missing to law enforcement. But what law enforcement can do about it, again, and what they're willing to do about it a lot of times is limited, unless there's suspicious circumstances where the person's been actively kidnapped, assaulted, murdered, etc., etc. What if a child goes missing internationally? Well, this is another big issue. I've had this where people have said to me, okay, what if their child goes to, Americans going to Europe. Child goes somewhere in Europe, they go on holiday, and the parents don't hear from them for a couple of days. The kid disappears. The kid's not answering their phone, the kid's not calling in, whatever. What can they do about it? Well, there's not much you can do about it. Again, unless there's suspicious circumstances. To report a child missing in Europe, say you're in the US or vice versa, you have to go to your local police department, file a report. They would contact whoever deals internationally. US, it would be FBI. Other countries, depends on the country. And they would have to liaise with the authorities in the country where the child went missing, person went missing. What can the police in that country do? Well, most police most police departments, most cops mentality is if you've got a teenager that's gone missing in, say, Europe, that was there on holiday, they're going to think they hooked up with somebody, they're with a boyfriend, they're with a girlfriend, they're wasted, they got drunk, they got drugged, they're out partying somewhere. If there's no suspicious circumstances, there's not much they can do. I heard of one case, somebody mentioned something to me a while back. It's the most recent thing that comes to mind, where two girls from, say, Southern Ireland, I think they were both in 14, 15 or something, fell in love with somebody online and jumped on a plane, train, etc., and went to Paris to meet the love of their lives. You know what? One girl, the police were looking for them. The Irish police liaised with the French police because it's a European Union, it makes things easier. And the girls were being looked for. But again, if you've got two teenage girls in Paris, in a major city, and again, you're thinking a city police department, a metropolitan police department, they've got a lot of other things to worry about. So they can't be actively looking for girls. And every police officer can't be scanning the streets for a specific person. One of the girls was found, last heard of, one of the girls was found in Paris. I think the 13-year-old, the younger one, was found. She went up to a police officer and said, I'm lost, etc., etc. She was found. The older girl, I don't think they've heard from. She's disappeared somewhere in France. Where could she be? Who knows? Is she with the love of her life, living the Barbie dream, or is she strung out on drugs somewhere being pimped out? Well, I go for the latter option more than the first option. But there's not much the authorities can do about it because, again, how are you going to find somebody? This is where, if somebody goes missing, if you're concerned about somebody that's traveling, make sure there's check-ins. Make sure they're going to be called in at specific times. They keep their phones with them, etc., etc. Put tracking software on their cell phones. Even these days, make sure always carry an AirTag with them or something. But again, this is where the whole missing persons thing, even though a lot of people think it's is something which is pretty simple, finding missing people, it can be very, very complicated, especially if those people don't want to be found. And again, generally for Americans going to Europe, they're not going to be kidnapped, they're not going to be snatched, etc., unless they want to be, unless they fall in with the wrong people, usually due to drugs, alcohol, and partying. I would say there's more threat for travelers these days, young travelers, to be drugged and raped and abused rather than being kidnapped. Because in most places these days, there's an abundance of vulnerable children and teenagers that the scumbag, criminals, pimps, etc. don't have to go kidnapping people. There's abundance of vulnerable people already available for that type of thing. So these days, I would say it's not so much a threat from travelers being kidnapped, but more being drugged and abused. But again, if people go missing, you need to have some protocols in place. But if somebody does go missing, if there's no protocols in place, if you don't know where they last were, if you don't have any communications with them, if you don't know who their friends were or who they were hanging out with, to find that person can be very, very difficult. Or if you're hiring somebody like me to do it, it's going to be very expensive. So this is where, as far as missing people are concerned, it's the same with kidnapping. You don't want to get kidnapped. The best prevention for kidnappers' ransom is don't get kidnapped. The same is the best prevention about people going missing is put protocols in place so they don't go missing, so you know where they are, so they're easy to find. But again, all this is pre-planning, preparations, etc., etc. And if you need to do that type of thing, we can assist you with it. Reach out. Just a little video there on missing people, which can be a very difficult situation to deal with from a private investigator's point of view, and a very traumatic situation from the family's point of view. But I hope this short video gives you some advice and some pointers. In the meantime, follow me along on social media. We've got a lot of videos up online on the main social media platforms that give advice, etc., about such things as this. and I have an array of books up on Amazon that talk about various aspects of the security, close protection business, etc. So follow us along, and if you need our services or if you need advice, feel free to reach out to me, and I will get back to you in time. In the meantime, be good, stay safe, and stay out of trouble. And always remember, always put protocols in place for any potential problems. Because again, you're better off identifying the problem before it happens and having protocols in place. So if something does happen, it makes the follow-up a lot easier and a lot quicker.